Hi, Jenna. How are you?
Rachel, how's it going?
Doing great. To start, I
Great,
wanted to
great poster over your shoulder, Sing Street, by the way. Very
thank
good.
you. I got all my little posters, but I wanted to start by asking you. There's a whole bit that they do on SNL about the women in boxing movies, and I think it has since like changed how a lot of female characters exist in these movies because like they don't have those little characteristics anymore that the character always kind of made fun of. And so I wanted to ask you, what was the most important thing about playing a character like this and making her not the caricature that we've kind of come to know when it is women in these boxing films?
Um, well, I think for me, I wanted to understand what it feels like to be a boxer and to be in a gym because Caitlin's not, she's not just the girlfriend. She's like his business partner. She works in the gym, she works out, she trains people. So I started training with an amazing coach, Ruth Raper. I'll give her a shout out. She used to box for GB. And I think it was important for me to sort of feel what that feels like in your body and to understand sort of the world of it. And yeah, and I mean in the script originally you see Caitlin actually doing some boxing and then we sort of ended up going to pad work, but that's fine. I can live with that part. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think with any characters, you just want them to feel like a real person. You want them to feel like they have a life and a story, and it's not just to service somebody else's. And I feel like we achieve that, even though this is Boxer's story. I feel like you feel that with Caitlin, that she has enough of a life going on that's her own.
Well, yeah, I was going to say you have this unique ability with your work because I was like watching this and it reminded me of why I love Ford versus Ferrari because that's also another character who like even though it's not her storyline and she is there as like she's filling out the life of this man, she is still her own person and her own character in that movie or in that piece. And it's the kind of the same thing here where it is a character who is, yes, filling out this man's life, but also she is her own person. And is that when you're looking at roles, is that something that you always want to try and find with a character?
Yeah, I mean, if I read a script and I feel like there's nothing that I can really connect to and hone in on and feel like there's enough of something there, then I have a young son and you don't want to take so much of your time away. You want to work with interesting people, good people, people who are going to be kind and nice to everybody, and on scripts that are interesting and stuff I haven't necessarily done before. But yeah, you just want to feel like there's something there, that there's enough. Um, and yeah, and I felt like with this, Sean Ellis is also, he was such an amazing director. And he had worked with a good friend of mine, Jamie Dornan, and I'd called Jamie and I was like, what do you think? And he was like, if you get a chance to work with him, do. So I was like, okay, this sounds great. And to see Orlando sort of do something that was so transformative for him, that was also really exciting. And also John Turturro, like who doesn't want to have go toe to toe with him? So that was, yeah.
He fulfilled my I was like, I'm Italian and we love boxing movies for some reason. And I was like, he's proving my point. For a last quick thing, I do just want to ask as a more fun question. You said that there were boxing scenes you guys cut. Is there then a world where you get to play an actual boxer? And is
Oh my
that,
God.
do you want to be in the action of these movies?
I got so into boxing. I still train, not as much as I'd like to, but I still train with Ruth when I can. And it's like there's so many also the world of women's boxing is so crazy and how long it took for them to be allowed to box legally and like professionally. There's so I mean I know there's a movie coming out soon about like a female boxer, but like I would be so down to enter that world again. So if anyone else has a movie about a slightly over the hill boxing lady, then yeah, I'd do it.
Like avid. Well, I love the cut. I can't wait for everyone else to get to see it. And thank you so much for talking with me today. I
Thank
really
you so much. So nice to talk to you, Rachel.
Hey Sean. So to start, I love that. I don't know what it is about Italians and boxing movies, but as an Italian, I always love that we exist in almost every single kind of boxing movie. So when John
Well,
Turturro showed
John
up,
Turturro.
yeah, I was like, we did it again. We, what is it about, those kind of characters, though, the like the support system, as it were, for the boxer in question that makes his character in particular so fascinating in a movie like The Cut, where we get to see him in glimpses and he's not like a constant figure.
Yeah, me and John talked a lot about that, and even before John had committed to doing the role, I think we'd had like nightly conversations. I was in London doing prep on the film, and I'd get a call from an agent. Can you speak to John tonight? So, yeah, so I called John and we would chat, and he's like, Tom, this scene, we would go through this scene and we would dissect it, and he would dissect it, and he was, we would talk about um, what kind of character he was. He was very much written as a drill sergeant, but John had mentioned The Hustler with Paul Newman and the George C. Scott character, who was this kind of gambling hall shark that kind of maneuvered his way through like that landscape. And he saw him more like that. And so I'd watch The Hustler, and then we'd come back and we chatted, and then so we sort of were honing in on what this character was. Yeah, and I think it took us about 2 weeks, and I suddenly realized that that's John's process. It's like talking constantly, and then literally, John was like, "Okay, well, I'll see you on set," and we were like, "Okay," and then John sort of turned up, and he had his own outfits. He like dressed the character, and he just pretty much came fully formed as Boz. So yeah, it was a really interesting process to work with him on that.
That's awesome. And like well, she's no longer on Saturday Night Live, but Heidi Gardner used to have a great character on Saturday Night Live, which was like woman in a boxing movie. And
Right,
like for so long, women in boxing movies were always like the disgruntled, afraid girlfriends and not
right.
their own characters. And I really like that in this movie that's not the case. And she has boxing history herself and is, very aware of like the sport and what's going into it. How important was it for you guys when you were working with Caitriona to like make sure that that character wasn't just playing into those caricatures that have been a part of this genre for so long?
Yeah, I mean, very important. And we spent a lot of time, me, Orlando, and Katrina, and we were definitely looking to build out the history of them as a couple. And we were definitely looking to build out, her particular backstory as well, because obviously his backstory is actually seen
Mm-hmm.
in flashback form. So we get that idea, but obviously, with Caitlin, it was very different. And so we started talking about, the fact that she was the daughter of a famous trainer, and that, like many young people have fallen foul of, taking drugs and being addicted to a certain lifestyle, and has gone through that, sort of come out the other side. And I love the fact that a lot of her kind of past is hinted at, like especially Donnie kind of hints at her past as a and being Ricky Duff's little girl, um but I think she just comes through as a force of nature, and ultimately, you know even John has a bit of a dig about, he says that line, do you know what the boys downstairs call you? And I thought that was a really interesting thing as well, that sort of alluded to this sort of an easy target, that she shuts down quite immediately. And I think, what I love about her character is she's already been there, um, where Boxer is, and she knows that she can't be the one to help him.
Hmm.
You can't help the one that you love. It's up to them, to find a way to say that they need help. And that's almost rule one of any addict, taking a step forward on the road of recovery. They need to, put their hands up and say, I'm not in control anymore. I'm unable to do this on my own. I need help.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things about this movie is that like it always fascinated me with boxing how the obsession with weight is because you have to be in a weight class and how you have to drop weight and all of that kind of stuff. And I never really thought about like the negative implications of something like that and what that puts on a person's mindset when you are exploring that in a movie where it kind of reminded me a lot of like Field of Dreams in the sense that it is like, yes, it's a boxing movie, but that's almost second nature to
Yeah.
everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
What for you was the biggest challenge of balancing both, making sure, yes, it's still a boxing movie, we're still doing the boxing things, but we're also tackling this bigger issue with Boxer.
I think it just deepened the drama and also gave some reason to it. I mean, the fact that as a professional athlete, he has to cut food, um, in order to make a weight division is obviously one thing. But then if you add into the mix that um, that he has a very unhealthy relationship with food based on, his relationship with his mother. And he's made that connection with, his mother kind of selling herself in order to get enough money in order for him to buy food. So there's this sort of, this you can understand that he's got a very unhealthy relationship with food. It's almost that's the, let me just shut that down because that's just annoying me. Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, he's still on that road to recovery right at the end, when that plate of food gets put down in front of him in the diner. He's sort of looking at it and you go, okay, this has been one of the biggest, this is the block for me almost, this, wanting to eat, but then feel guilty for it because I put on weight and I can't, and then, but then I should eat because my mom sold herself in order to pay for it. And, so he's got this, this internal fight that this battle that goes on about food. And obviously, even at the end, when that food plate gets put down, he's got such a huge journey in front of him in order to make himself well again.
Yeah, when I talked to John and Orlando about the movie, John was like praising Orlando for a moment where he was like training and basically had to like take an Epsom salt bath to like lose all that weight. When you're
Yeah.
working with an actor who is like willing to go that extra mile, but it also is like you and him have to have like a conversation, I'm assuming, about kind of like what he's going through for this. What for you was the like biggest, not challenge, but like hurdle that the two of you had to go through to making sure you guys were on the same page about the character and what like Orlando had to go through in order to bring that to life?
Well, I think ultimately Orlando had done the work. He turned up at his lightest, and so he'd done the work.
Mm.
He was in character. He'd worked so hard on his accent. He'd worked really hard on his boxing. He'd done phenomenal amount of work on losing weight, and and he was gaunt looking and tired and ill looking, and just he had to lie down in between takes. It was kind of his brain was covered in fog, and he was all over the place. He was a bit paranoid, and and he was his focus was just to keep his focus on the takes. And I was obviously very worried that was he going to know where he was in any given scene, like emotionally. We were shooting this in reverse chronological order as well, so that's a huge jigsaw puzzle to complete. And I think when I first saw the rough cut, I mean, my first question was like, how's Ovi? Is the performance, does it come through? And my editor was like, oh, you got to see it. It's like, he landed on every beat on every scene, like emotionally pitch perfect. So I don't know how he did that or how he kept it all in his nugget, but he did it. And yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly proud of the work that he did, and I think it was a great honor to be the person that help film that and record that and bring that to life, which was you could see the work that he'd done. It just needed to be filmed.
Was it always your plan to do it in reverse chronological order, especially since he has to end at a lighter weight than he's starting at?
um he No, that came from the nutritionist basically said he can't lose weight while he's filming.
Mm.
It's impossible. because what happens is they can't concentrate. He'll be all over the place. You know, he has to come to you already at his latest, and then he starts to eat and put his weight back on, and it wake up his brain. He'll start getting the calories in his system again, and he'll be able to work. He'll have the energy to work, and so you'll have to shoot the end of the movie first and the beginning of the movie last. So that was how we did it.
Was when you get things like that as a director, and like somebody whose job is to either protect an actor, or like someone's job is to tell you, hey, actually I need to do this thing. Is it exciting for you as like part of a challenge to then change how your approach to something is going to be, because you know, like, okay, well now I got to do it this way and have to flip my vision?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you're as a director, you're constantly rolling with the punches. So yeah, nothing really ever surprises me on a set anymore. Um, I know if it will go wrong, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. And your job as a director generally is to finish the day having solved 75% of the day's problems. I think that's a good number. It's just learning to live with the 25% that you didn't solve. Um, but that's generally, yeah, you're like, okay, well, that, we can't do that because of this. And you go, okay. So that idea that I had is out the window.
When I wanted to ask, uh, you know, when you're shooting a boxing ring, it's always fascinating to me because I feel like every boxing movie has a different approach to how you shoot in the ring, and no shot is kind of the same. What for you was the one thing that you really wanted to do with like how you were shooting the fight sequences in the actual ring?
In the beginning of the film, you mean?
Yeah.
Um, well, I wanted them to look absolutely as real as possible. Um, and I think, boxing movies for me, because I'm a boxer, they kind of fall down when I can see that the technique's not very good.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess one of the issues of this film was it was a boxing film with no boxing. So, you know, Orlando wasn't really concentrating on boxing so much, other than, I wanted him to train so that he looked he walked like a fighter. He held himself like a fighter. He didn't necessarily have to get in the ring and look like he could box. Um, so, so when we did have that sequence where he was in the ring and fighting, it was about trying to get to make it as realistic as possible as far as a boxing fight goes. And I guess I looked at a lot of boxing movies, and the way that I approached it was I was going to use all the sort of same camera angles that they do on TV. So, so I knew that they would have a long camera way back with a zoom, and that they're slightly above the ring, and you can see the ring floor. And then I know that they have maybe two cameras around the edge of the ring, and they film it around there. So generally we filmed using the same kind of angles as they do a real boxing match. And then I think once you've got three angles, you can really use the edit to cut out any dead space or any, bad technique. You can cut around it.
Yeah. Well, and for last thing I wanted to ask you, a movie like this, like I said before, I like that it is not just like another boxing movie. Like it is for the most part a movie about a man's struggle with boxing as just like an element of who he is. What for you is the most exciting part about people getting to see not only Orlando's performance, but like the work you did on a movie that, like you said, is a boxing movie without boxing, but you never feel like you're losing anything throughout it?
Um, yeah, I mean, as long as they're not going there thinking they're going to watch Rocky, um, which might be a bit of a disappointment if that's what you think you are going to see. But I think you are going to see, something that is actually quite honest, and quite, it has its moments where it's very, very dark. And I think it kind of goes off the rails sometimes in that respect. But also, I love the fact how quiet some of those parts are. Like the scenes between him and Caitlin, I find really touching, and the fact that, you know, he's not just this macho fighter. You know, he is, you know, he's struggling with, you know, what he thinks he needs to do, and what he doesn't realize is that, you know, what he wants is actually not what he really needs. um and so I think it's a journey about uh people that, you know, learn to figure out how to heal themselves in a way that they're not actually expecting. And hopefully, you know, there's entertainment there along the ride as well. I mean, it's like I said, it's not Rocky entertainment. It's not like, it's not punching your fists in the air kind of. It's, some of it is hard and you'll be looking away, but it's ultimately, you know, I think it's the journey that he needed to take. They say that an addict has to hit rock bottom before they can start the work to recover. And I think this is what that film's almost about. It's about somebody that has to hit rock bottom.
Well, I like this movie a lot. I can't wait for everyone else to get to see the cut. And so thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel. Very
Have a
sweet of
great
you.
one. Nice meeting you. Hi guys, how are you?
Hi,
Very good.
hi, Rachel.
Hi. To start, John, I want to say you fulfilled my favorite part of boxing movies, which I'm also Italian, and for some reason we love boxing movies. There's always some Italian dude in them, and I was like, it's John, hell yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But I
yeah.
wanted to ask you, how is it for you being a part of a boxing movie where you get to be, you know, the coach in that iconic role for someone like Orlando, and getting to, you know, not egg him on, but like make sure he has the support he needs in a very brutally honest kind of way?
Well, managers throughout the course of boxing history have, real and trainers have had a huge effect on a lot of great fighters. And some people, Mike Tyson, Gus D'Amato, he trained a lot of champions. They all fought the same way. They all had a peekaboo style. And he was kind of like uh, a pseudo psychiatrist or psychologist, and take these people from the streets and get the most out of them. So I think that's an interesting dilemma, but in boxing, because it's such an intimate relationship. And if you have a wife or boyfriend, a girlfriend, or whatever, they're kind of in the way in some ways. I mean, the whole idea is that you don't have sex when you're training. That was always a big thing in the whole history of boxing. And so it's and they're very interesting characters, and I think Orlando really kind of captured that because there's a gentility to them versus, and then there's this, and their trade is brutality.
Yeah.
And so he kind of has that just kind of in him.
Mhm.
And I really liked that a lot. I thought that was, you see the vulnerability of the person. So I thought that was really interesting, and it just was a fresh take on the boxing film.
Yeah, I 100% agree. In Orlando, I love within these boxing stories, there's always something going on in a boxer's life that we're focused on more than what's actually happening in the ring. And I love that this is talking about an issue that I've always wondered about boxers, because I'm like, they're so obsessed with their weight. How does that actually correlate into their own mental health? For you, how is it to get to explore that with a character who, you know, you have to do that boxing stuff, you know it's on the back burner, but you also have all this other stuff to work with?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was almost like no acting required once I started dropping the weight and getting into the headspace because dropping the weight, I mean, I actually, I'm a very physical person, actor, and all that's my way in many ways. And when the script, which was so excellently written, when I realized what was going to be required and asked of me, and once I committed to really doing that, it sort of led to all of the things that you see, unfolding for boxer. I mean, the intrusive thoughts, the paranoia, the desperation for a second shot, the desperation to drop this weight. And I had this moment where I just could not get past 169 pounds. It was crazy. And the nutritionist who I was working with said, okay, he was timing everything like to a T. He said, right, just before we got to the first 3 days of filming, which is where most of that, because we were shooting reverse chronological order in order that I had some brain power as we went through the film, because I couldn't have done that film the other way around. He had me do an Epsom salt bath, which I dropped 10 pounds in one night, and I was just like, what? It was insane. I had a huge amount of Epsom salt in a bath and drank a liter of water. It was like osmosis. I don't know what it was. It just disappeared, and I came in the next day and I was gone. I was just
He was like
gone.
a raisin. He was like a dried raisin. I was very concerned. I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I
I was
hope.
hardly drinking water in those last two
Yeah,
days.
yeah. It
Trying to
was. It
why I
was.
look.
Yeah.
Jesus. Well, and I
It
wanted
is.
to ask both of you, because a boxing movie is completely different. Like you've all both have done so many different genres. Like I was sitting here trying to think of examples. I was like, John, you were in like Secret Window and now you're in Severance and you've done Mr. Deeds, Orlando. I love Elizabethtown unapologetically. Like you've done a bunch of different genres in your careers, but I also feel like this is such a different ball game entirely when you do not just a sports movie, but especially a boxing movie. Was that when you guys were on set, did it feel different than doing something like a genre project or doing something like that? Or was it kind of just like a different beast within the same umbrella?
Well, I don't think people judge movies about how much time they have to shoot. We
Mm,
didn't have a lot of time, but because Orlando developed it and did a tremendous amount of preparation, on it, and because the script was more about the journey to the fight and the battle within himself. We're almost like characters inside of him, me and Katrina. We're almost, uh, we tried to turn that into our advantage. But every film is different. Every film it's its own challenge. And you don't want to do the same thing over and over again because we'd all go out of our minds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
And
you're
this is
always,
and we love, I mean, it's funny. John's a huge fan of boxing and famously, and Sean Ellis, and I'm a fan of the boxing and the genre, and it's just such a fresh take. It's such an unusual, fresh take on a genre that we've seen and loved for so many years. Getting to see and do this movie was just so special because it was new and different, and it really explores the fight going on in here, the boxer, and the fight going on in John and Katrina, and how the desperation, and in a way he's boxer's going for his last shot of a title, and they're all in that boat together. They're all struggling for that. They all, and all the weight is on boxer, and it's just that weight is dragging him. And John has amazing lines that he delivers so perfectly, but it's like it was just a very well executed script, and Sean Ellis was as a brilliant director, and as a DOP who actually directs as well. We had no money to make this movie, but we're in a handful of locations, and one of them was a room in a hotel in Heathrow for like so long. But you never feel like you're in that room for more than one. Yeah, it's funny, but we were constantly in that room. We had a week or so there, but it doesn't feel like, out of 28 days, we spent at least a third or more of the time in that room, and he just shot it so beautifully. So I'm very proud of the fact that we got to do this in a
absolutely.
fresh take on a genre that I think people are really fans of. So hopefully, they'll respond like that.
yeah, I agree. It's an honor to talk to both of you today. So
Thank
thank
you.
you guys so much. And I can't
All
wait
right.
for to get to see the cut.
Thanks, Rachel.